Okay, so welcome everyone to our the last of our series, our soil series of Take 5. What we did was look at cover crops, relay cropping, compaction, and controlled traffic, and now we're looking at stripping, not what you think it is. And we've had a lot of great discussions as we try to kind of still meet despite COVID. And another way we're also meeting, especially if there's like sidebar conversations that you're having, we have these smaller Let's Talk Soil online chats, which are just semi-structured, very informal, just get 5 farmers on a call and let the magic happen. So if you guys are interested in that, sign up at the website, ontariosoil.net. If you've never been on a Zoom webinar before, there's not too many of us, so that's great. And we will open it up for discussion afterwards. But for now, you'll see in this corner, just keep yourself muted with that little microphone button, and keep your video off as well, just till the end, because it keeps everything going faster. You can chat by clicking this button, and then you can see what other people are chatting or ask your question if you're too shy. You can clap online or react, and you can toggle different views. If you only want to see the speaker, if you want to see more people, that's up to you. And you can see the other participants. You can actually share private messages to the participants. I see Andy is clapping, thank you, or waving, I'm not sure. So Woody is, well, my name's Mel Limas. I never introduced myself. I'm really loud, but I'm going to try to be quiet because Woody is going to be emceeing the event tonight. And Woody is a farmer in Dresden, Ontario, and he is a superstar innovator and the co-founder of the Ontario Soil Network. So take it away, Woody, and introduce what the Soil Network's all about.
So Mel, you pretty well covered it.
No. Oh, that you're a superstar?
No. First of all, I'm going to thank all the speakers for taking the time to participate in this tonight, and hopefully that brings them into part of what we call the network, and it's a mechanism for farmers interested in soil health to connect at all levels, to either learn from other farmers or share what they've learned or bounce ideas off of. So it's very much a grassroots learning opportunity for farmers interested in soil. So with that, today we're talking about strip tilling. It's not Take 5 strippers, so we're just Take 5 strip tilling. And so we'll start off with our first speaker, our first farmer participant, and that is Janet Rayburn. And Janet, along with her father, Larry Rayburn, farm 1,100 acres outside of Beachburg in Eastern Ontario. The Rayburns grow a variety of crops, including corn, non-GMO soybeans, canola, wheat, cereal grains, forage peas, flax, sunflowers. With a focus on their soil, the Rayburns have been tweaking their tillage program over the years and have introduced strip till the last 6 years. Even after the introduction of strip till, they are still trying to improve the system they're working on. So with that, go ahead, Janet.
Hi, everyone. As a background to the farm that we currently are on, the reason for going to strip till was this farm is heavy clay, was heavily compacted whenever my dad first bought it. And over the years, they have tried to minimize the number of trips over the field, minimizing labor costs, trying to leave as much residue as possible, just to improve the health of the soil. So one of the things has been this progression to a strip tiller. Originally, the idea was, well, I shouldn't say seen. My dad was at the outdoor farm show, and he saw one of these Gladiator units working, and he thought it was doing a really great job, and so kind of mulled it over for the winter time and the next spring purchased a 6-row unit. This is the unit we currently have, but we started out with a 6-row unit, and it worked fine, except there was a few issues with, one was we did not have RTK guidance, was one issue. Another issue was that all of our machinery was meant for 12-row. Our planting was 12-row. Our 32% applicator was 12-row. So the 6-row didn't work overly well in terms of matching what our equipment was. But we persevered with it for 2 or 3 years, and then we ended up trading it in on a 12-row unit. And again, the unit worked well. It matched our equipment. The only issue with it is we did not have a cart on top of it like we do in this picture. We were actually towing this unit behind an air cart, and it was difficult to see, difficult to get straight once you got turned around. So we were discussing what we were going to do, and there is units available, Montag units, but we didn't like the cost of them. So we came up with the idea of mounting a cart that we already had. And my dad's quite good at manufacturing things, and this is what he managed to come up with, and it has worked quite well. I guess one of the main things drawing us to the strip tilling was the fact that we could reduce the number of passes, but we could also put the fertilizer where we wanted it, where the crop needed it. And so we've just continued, as Woody said, we've continued to tweak it. This is a picture of us strip tilling. This was on the 29th of August of this year. This was going straight into wheat stubble. Our unit is a combination unit of coulters and shank, and in the fall they recommend going 7 inches. So this is what we have it set at, and it's doing quite a nice job. Again, this is just a close-up picture of what was happening here. You can see the berm that has been made, and you can see how the chain reel at the back has broken up all of those lumps, and it looks like quite a nice seed bed to go into. Yes, the ST Pro unit is what the system is on ours. So you can see there's a coulter on the front, which cuts the earth, and then the little coulters on the side, they whip away the trash. And then with your shank in behind, and obviously your fertilizer going down the tube in behind the shank, and then the coulters throwing the dirt back up to make the berm, and then the chain reel breaking up any of the lumps that might accumulate there. But that is the unit itself. And this, again, the same day, you can see the height of the berm compared to the height of my dad's foot there. And this slide on the right-hand side is a picture that we took of him after it had been made. He dug that with his hand. He didn't use a shovel. So we were just showing how the system has loosened up the soil, and that should make for a really great spot to put that corn seed.
I think I could get the video to play.
Oh, perfect.
Surprise.
So yeah, this was just wanting to show how the unit itself worked. And it was a beautiful day for doing this. I guess some of the things that we have learned along the way is that your equipment needs to match. If you're not working with RTK guidance, it definitely needs to match. It makes it really difficult if you're trying to plant something that's with something that's a little bit bigger. It just doesn't work that well. We did try using auto guidance, but we were having a little bit of an issue where if there was any bit of a knoll or a hollow, the auto guidance seemed to get thrown off, and it didn't work well. So we made it really simple, and we actually put a pole out with a chain hanging down just to show where the last row was that was strip tilled, and that seemed to work the best when we were trying to get along with the 6-row strip tiller. And then obviously when we went to the 12-row strip tiller, we didn't have that same issue anymore. And we are using auto guidance to make our strips. And then the planter can follow along because it does match for the most part. And with the, especially when done with the height of the berm as it is now, it's quite easy to see, quite easy to follow. And the planter basically just sits right in that strip. And as long as everything works the way it's supposed to, it goes along pretty good. I'm just trying to kind of look at my notes here. I think I've probably pretty much covered everything that I wanted to say.
What do you have a question for her?
Well, I was just going to say you were at 5 minutes and 43 seconds, so
Okay,
just about
I
perfect.
kind of cut some out from Saturday, so that's good.
So just a quick question. You'd mentioned that some of the equipment costs were holding you back. Have you realized any savings from going to strip till?
Basically, this unit has pretty much eliminated the need for your major trips like plowing, disking, cultivating, putting on fertilizer. We're basically doing that all with this one machine. So I think right there, you've eliminated your time that it takes, your labor costs, your fuel costs, your maintenance on your equipment because you're not using it as much. I think it's hard to quantify. We actually haven't figured out, what it was costing us before, but I think you can safely say that it's definitely a cost savings.
Janet, it's Sandy here. Is that a shank or just a coulter system?
It's a shank system with the coulters on the front, and then it has a shank.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
So our next farmer is Tyler McBlain, and he manages McBlain Farms with his parents and wife in eastern end of Brant County. They've been a long time cover crop users and no-till for wheat and soybeans. Going into year 4 of strip go corn, Tyler's thinking about the next generation growing up and wants to have a healthy soil for them to work with. So his goal is to work for the children that he just had, or the child that he just had. So go ahead, Tyler.
If I look like I'm falling asleep, I apologize, but the newborn has been keeping us up at night. So yeah, so it's number 3. So we haven't figured out how we're going to sort out things yet, or which one, but anyway. I said Tyler McLean. Just, I guess, next slide right away, we'll get right into it. What I'm going to talk about, instead of going all through what we do, is basically how we've made strip till work for us and how we're constantly making changes to try and make it work. A lot of our ground predominantly is heavy clay, Haldeman clay. I've seen Matt here, so he knows what I'm talking about. So we make a lot of our decisions based on the clay ground. We have some better ground, but it's a little more forgiving, so we can kind of do what we want there. So we've been long time no-tillers, soybeans and wheat. Been trying to reduce tillage even more. So they're going to year 4, but started strip tilling for corn. The ground we're dealing with is 1-day clay. It's 1 day too early, 1 day too late. And if we're lucky, you might get the right day. It's very shallow topsoil. Very easy to ruin the farm. You go in there, it's too wet, you go in too deep. So the less we disturb it, the better. So next. So we spent several years looking at machines, kind of had a list of what we wanted. We wanted a coulter machine. We did not want a shank for our clay ground. It had to be heavy because the ground's really hard. We wanted something that could go through really heavy cover crops. So after we limited our options because we wanted just a coulter machine at the time. So we ended up with a Soil Warrior unit. It's strictly shallow coulters. We do not have the deep cog system with it. And then, so next slide, please. Okay. So one thing we worked with Soil Warrior for is to put a third coulter on it. When we were looking at them, there was, basically it's a gauge wheel there for depth. So we worked with them to come up with a third coulter. So my understanding is the first one in Canada with that third coulter option. There were some, and then some in the US. Some other things we found that in our clay we had to do to make this work for us after running it. So it'd be fall of 2017, I was having trouble keeping the wings in the ground. So we took it to the shop, we built weight brackets to beef up the wings. Ran that the spring of 2018, still wasn't heavy enough. So we actually changed the air valves to the heavier air valves meant for the deep cogs. I think they're 75 PSI relief valves. Still couldn't keep the wings in the ground. So we have since added actually constant wing pressure to it, and now finally to do a good job. Another change, when we bought it with a budget in mind, because I didn't want to sell my firstborn to buy this machine. So we had to limit some options on it, but we ended up adding rolling baskets after the first season, again, just in the springtime, just trying to get a good seed to soil contact. It was too rough. So just with the clay there, trying different things and trying to evolve it. So the other thing, again, we've learned, so the first year we bought the machine, we got possession of it late October. So we started stripping because of the weather in December. Learned that rather get it done sooner. So we've kind of evolved to now we're stripping basically the end of September. So next week we'll be out running our strips in our cover crop. The first year we stripped everything, worked well, but trying to get away to a one pass tillage system. So now actually all our soybean stubble it's spring stripped only. And even the cover crop, I hopefully would like to get to a spring strip only. I'm just nervous with the amount of material there, leaving it and trying to get a clean strip. Next. Other things, again, changing for our ground here, working with different soil types. We started with a straight rate fertility the first year just to get our feet wet. And now we're running a full variable rate program with it, both spring and fall, with the goal of actually putting all the fertilizer down with the strip tiller, none with our corn planter, and eliminating the dry fertilizer off our corn planter. So we have a bunch of plots out this year where we're putting everything down with the strip tiller and none with the corn planter, minus the end. We do put about half our end up front between weed and feed and with our starter, and then they have the rest, the balance is put down via Y drops. Next. Not the strip tiller, but also to help, we've tweaked the corn planter a bit. We were struggling with basically berming on either side of the strip with our corn planter, so we've actually added drag chains and actually had to widen them out from stock to, that picture shows the berms kind of on the side there to level it out for the following year, no tilling soybeans. And then we've also added Yetter twister closing wheels, just seem to help just get a little better seed to soil contact over the traditional rubber closing wheels. Next. And for us, there's more changes to come. We had some different things looking at adding row cleaners to the machine, the narrow gauge wheels for our corn planter. Just, we keep learning, we keep evolving, keep changing. So every year there's gonna be something changed to hopefully do a better job for us. Okay. That's it.
Awesome.
And there should be one more kid in that picture now.
Yeah. Yeah.
My wife wouldn't let me draw a stick figure.
So Tyler, you were exactly 5 minutes. I mean, right on. Bang on 5 minutes. So you mentioned something about 1 day clay.
Yes.
Is the spring strip till program on that heavy clay, does it give you more flexibility or a bigger window to work with than it would if you were conventional?
Still got to be patient, and that's the key to the clay, is being patient, which can be a challenge when the sun's shining. But if we hit it right, I don't know, like a little bit, I guess the little bit of experience we have so far in our few years, it's similar to just with the cultivator. But as far as if on the cover crop, if we're stripping it twice, it does give us a little bigger window because we are getting it to dry out a little faster on that strip. So still learning a little bit there. It's so we only have a couple farms that have been going into their second time being stripped. So a lot of our stuff's only had one rotation through it. So it's still a learning curve for us.
Okay, thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Mark Richards is a farmer from near Dresden, Ontario, and grows corn, soybeans, soybeans and wheat in a no-till situation, and corn, sugar beets, and tomatoes in a strip till combination. And he farms Oh, 3,500 acres, Mark, if I remember right.
Close to that. In partnership,
Mark's
Mike.
cousin. So Mark's goal is to incorporate cover crops into all aspects of his farm, and it varies from heavy clay to light sands. Mark spends a lot of time designing and building custom equipment to make the strip till cover crop program work better, faster, and more efficient. So with that, Mark.
So right off the top, the first slide says, my takeaway is supposed to be invest in the right tools to get the job done. But when it comes to fabricating and adapting equipment, just because you can doesn't always mean you should. Take a look at what's available, quote unquote, off the shelf, and make your decision based on that, because oftentimes it's easier to tweak something that was built for the purpose as opposed to starting from scratch. And I'll get a little example of that. Next slide. The first foray we had into strip till did not include a rig like this, and this is Northland One Tripper, as you can see from the picture with a Montag card. We actually built a machine from scratch on an old rear fold Kinsey planter frame. I can't remember what the number was, but we spent a lot of time designing, fabricating, putting it all together, and it didn't trail straight. And we tweaked it some more and determined that it wasn't going to fit, and that actually held us off adopting strip till for a few years. But we had the strong belief that since we were no-tilling corn or soybeans and wheat, and we couldn't get a successful corn stand no-till, which we've learned a lot since then, we still wanted that never-till stretch between the rows. And we did finally look around. We determined that the Orthman would fit our operation. Mr. Van Arkel may have had a little bit of influence there because we borrowed or rented his to try it the first year. We were impressed with what we saw, and we kept going. So when I talk about, next slide, when I talk about making tweaks to existing equipment, we've actually switched. This was 3 rows of cover crop interseeded in the fall, and then we made fall strips through it. So it was very simple once you figured it out. On the John Deere, we pull a 30-foot John Deere air seeder. It's an 1860 with a 1900 cart. We would put fertilizer down with one tank and cover crop with the other tank. We would block off. You could block off the 12 runs. You just had to side shift a little, or shift your line a little bit, and it lined up perfect. You could strip till through it. And even though where we work doesn't look like the rows are still in good shape, all 3 rows of rye came up. We've since switched to 2 because we like a wider strip so the planter runs smoother. In the spring, we started running a Biostrips 2 years ago. It's got hydraulic down pressure, but to run at the speed, you need a good, smooth, clean strip. And what we were finding was some root balls in the strip that kind of wrecked the ride. Go to the next slide. So the next slide shows you a picture of the back window of how we used to do tomatoes. And we kind of stepped into the strip tilling tomatoes because we were always thinking there's got to be a way that we can take advantage of that never tilled strip between our rows. So we went to control traffic, and this is one of the rigs. We actually purchased this one set up this way. We added the fertilizer, but we're into that efficiency thing, doing more than one thing each pass. So this machine would put the fertility down, work the ground, apply the herbicide, and pack the beds down so we had a good surface for the planter to run in. One thing you need to know about tomato planters, they do not lend themselves to handling trash very well. So when we were working overall, we had, you can see the cover on either side of the strip that I'm working in. It was fairly thick, and it took usually 3 passes to get a suitable seed bed for the tomato planter. However, after the next slide, the next one's out of the back window in the fall that we decided when we bought a 6-row Orthman, moved the rows over. We plant tomatoes on a twin 22-inch spacing on 60-inch center. So basically take a 6-row 30 implement, move each row in 4 inches, each pair of rows in 4 inches. I think you can get the concept. This was cover crop seeded with the drill and again, it worked out for that row spacing to block off the appropriate runs on the air seeder. When we planted 100 acres this way, I was able to strip till through it without having to get off to unplug it once. Row cleaners would run fairly lightly and it worked perfectly. Next slide. So the next thing we did was build a one pass unit. We were spreading some fertility out. We had 9 fertilizer openers, so the middle of the twins and each side of the twins got fertilizer, and then we also put some of the fertilizer in the back. We since adjusted, we put all the fertilizer in the strip, and this machine is getting repurposed, and those fertilizer openers will plant our cover because we need the cover between the tomato rows. If we go to the next slide, because we want a strip that looks nice and clean and dark to plant the tomatoes in, like you see in this picture. And to get the rye to stay that high, because this picture was taken in late May, early June, we go in early with Liberty, and that's part of our system to control the rye growth. So we still have rye, but it's not atrociously tall when we go through the tomato planter, because we don't want to shade the transplants. Next slide will give you a picture of, well, I'm going to have to skip a few slides because I'm 5.5 minutes. So go ahead. We build an interseeder. We did the first version. We copied off of Woody. We had Woody. I used Woody's 1.0 interseeder. The one in the picture is 2.0. The next slide is 3.0. And we apply nitrogen while we interseed between B6 and B7. We're probably going to step that up to B5 for a little better growth. And that's last picture, which is also the background you're looking at. If my image comes up while I'm speaking, is the results of being a clover, radish, and ryegrass mix at B7 that was common in the corn last fall. I was 6 minutes and 22 seconds.
Perfect. Yeah, Mark has a habit of seeing what my little equipment does, tries it, and then supersizes it to cover bigger acres.
Woody's the innovator, and I'm the commercialization department. So.
Make a great team.
So just my quick question for Mark is, because you are in the sugar beet business and the tomato business, with this minimal disturbance or no-till zones, do you find that your equipment in fall harvest causes less damage, or you have less issues with ruts, better carrying ability for your equipment?
So yes, I think in the sugar beets particularly, we see a little bit of, where we're using meter-wide tires on the equipment in the sugar beet field. We have a self-propelled harvester and a self-propelled chase cart. The average tire, it's 1050s on the back, 950s on the front. We definitely see less rutting, because where we have to pull a dump cart with a tractor, you can see more rutting than we would in tomatoes, because after we do, like, I know this picture that's up there right now looks beautiful, cover crop. By the time we interrow cultivate, and with the amount of nitrogen we add and the growth of the tomatoes and the bugs in the tomatoes, there's not very much cover left in the fall. And I keep telling people when they ask if it carries better in a tomato field, when a tomato field's wet, the tomato field's wet. And it just looks ugly when you drag 10 tons of tomatoes, 20 tons of tomatoes in a tub on even 425 tires through the field. It just looks plain ugly. So it does, I think it does help, but it's not fixing what ails us in the tomato field. I hope that answers the question adequately.
Thanks, Mark. Next is Harry Biermans. And in 1978, at the age of 19, Harry Bierman started farming near Chesley as part of his family business. Today, Bierman Farms employs 5 full-time staff, grows 5,000 acres of grains and oil seeds, does custom work on thousands of acres to boot. Add to that, Harry is a proponent of soil health and succession plan, and is working with an employee turned partner turned successor, Mark Ribley, if I pronounce that right. So with that, Harry, if you could carry on.
Is Harry? Uh-oh. Harry, are you there? Did we lose him?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
There it is.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Go
Okay.
on.
All right. I've been really listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, Woody. Yeah, we're up by Chesley in Bruce County, which is our season certainly isn't as long as Woody has and Mark. So we have issues that are related to getting the crop in on time. So anyway, we started strip tilling about 11 years ago, and seems, of course, every year we do things a little bit different. For us, like in strip tilling, soil health is the #1 priority, and strip till helps us achieve that. Our soils are quite variable, clay to clay loam, sand, and all in the same field. We have farms like Tyler where it's 1-day clay, and so I understand totally what he's talking about. So all those issues we got to make it work in a field, and that's what I like about strip tilling is that we can actually accomplish that. Next slide. So we started with a John Deere 2510S strip tiller 12-row, and we've been pulling a 1910 cart behind with fertilizer in the back and cover crop over the strip in the front. And so we just blow the cover crop over the strip. So that has worked well, but we were never really satisfied with the quality of strip that it would make. It's a shank machine. We need to use a shank on our soils to open it up. Next slide. So we are going to be using now a TerraForge strip tiller, which they have a combination shank machine, and the picture on the bottom right is they're like a rolling tine, and they're spaced about 2 inches apart, and they will go in place of the shank, and so you can set them whatever depth you want. So we're stripping at we're achieving 8 inches of in the fall, and so we want to go over the strip in the spring just to open it up, and we don't want to lose the moisture, so we're planting into a nice moist seed bed. That's strip tilling, it gives you that. Next slide. So part of our whole program is manure or compost. All our corn ground, so like 1/3 of our acres generally gets covered with manure. So we spend a lot of time spreading manure. But it is, I would say it is really, really key to soil health. It's a great nutrient package, and it's a great biology stimulant. So it works well for us. So next slide. So we are, after we apply the manure, we're planting our cover crop, and generally we're doing a 3, 4, or 5-way mix. So oats, tillage radish, Austrian winter peas, vetch, and then some we still do red clover, single cut red clover, but we seem to have a struggle to get a good stand, so we seem to be always adding cover crops to fill it in. But I do love red clover if you got a good stand. Nothing beats the what it adds to the soil. So I'm not sure where that's going to go, the red clover, but and you can see in the red clover with the oats covering the strip. Next slide. So for us, I mean, that's why we switched strip tillers, is that we've done some demoing, and we really like the TerraForge, the strip it makes. And I mean, we can do the same as, I think was Janet was mentioning, digging in, and like it just does a beautiful job of, you know, opening up that whole profile of the strip. And but we like to do our strips in August when it's the driest. And so, I mean, it's our busiest months are probably August, and that's, you know, after the wheat harvest, like the work begins. And so it's a race to get it all done before, you know, and sometimes we don't. We've gone through years of, you know, making less than perfect strips, and, you know, and we really paid for it. So the strips are all done with RTK, and the John Deere we used a steering hitch. So it's very important to keep them straight, and, you know, so that you're planting on them the next year. So the fertilizer is mixed in the strip, and then what we're doing is we're applying enough P&K for a 3-year rotation of corn, soybeans, and wheat, and we give credit to the manure. And so we're using, keeping track of the nutrients added and removed through the NMAN program in general. Next slide. So that's just a photo of us covering the strips, and we'll burn that down in the fall, just so that we can get some biology working and getting that opened up for the spring. Next slide. We also do, like Tyler does, variable rate fertilizer. Our fields are swap mapped, and we create zones based on soil type, fertility, elevation, and of course our own knowledge of the field. So we can do fertilizer prescription based on each zone and the potential and the crop needs. The next slide. So as I said before, we fall terminate the cover crop in late October, and the biomass produced stays in place for the winter protection of the soil, and slowly breaks down, you know, over the winter. So by April, our strips are opening up. You can see on the right-hand side, and then by June, after it's been planted, the residue a lot of it's been consumed. So anyway, my take-home message is, though, although strip till has many benefits, one of the most important ones for us is having that fertility placed in the strip, readily available for the next corn crop. So thank you.
Thanks, Harry.
Off the book, forgot to start my timer. You did every time I had a question, you answered it, Harry. So
5 minutes exactly.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, but you kept answering them in your presentation, so you did a good job. So maybe some questions will pop up afterwards, and
Sure.
we'll just move on to Ryan, our foreigner. So Ryan Shaw farms about 1,500 acres of corn, soybeans, sugar beets in the heart of Michigan's thumb. Having converted an entire farm to strip till in 2014, Shaw's now off the farm with a I'm in trouble. Conservation approach. Strip till, no-till, planting cover crops, including interseeding into corn and sugar beets, using control traffic, adding filters and pollinator strips to field edges, and focusing on soil health, structure, and a balance of nutrition. So with that, go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks, Woody. I guess we'll jump right into it. You can skip to the next slide. One thing that we're doing different with our strips is we are on the same planting strip every year. We just started that way. It seems easier to recycle the nutrients, and we knew we'd be able to keep our compaction in simple areas, or we could control where they were at least. What he said, we did this in 2014 when we switched over. We sold all of our tillage equipment. Everybody thought we were going out of business, but we sold it all to, it was easier not to fall back on it or just go get a tillage tool and work up the field where we thought we maybe made some tracks or something. So, but we started with a Soil Warrior, a 12 row with a widening kit to plant or accommodate our twin rows, where we do the twin row corn and the soybeans on that same strip, where the sugar beets would still be on 30-inch, would be splitting those root balls between the corn root balls. So we're not actually always dislodging the roots. We're sometimes just slicing them with that Soil Warrior. That is a 3-coulter machine with 2 dry boxes on it. Next slide. We're practicing some of the controlled traffic. I guess it's our monosem planter that we set all up to be able to plant all 3 of our crops with it, and a hitch that shifts ourselves over to get 1 row of that planter in the center of our strip, to keep our wheels all on the same tram lines, set up at 120 inches. And in the one picture in the center there, to the right hand side, you can see it's a Google Earth picture. That's 6 years we've been on the same tram lines, and you can see where somebody turned around with the grain cart partway across the field. So we kind of tell our hired guys that they can't get away with anything anymore. That sticks right out. And we also bought a row airway, a row crop one, to punch holes in our tram lines to help let some of the northern climate and the frost work for us a little more, to help mitigate those tram lines that we're packing down each year. Next slide. This is what we call our interseeder. We built this in 2016. We were always flying rye into our corn in the fall, and we did that for 3 years, got great stands, great germination, everything, but we were using a lot of seed, and after 3 years, we didn't even own the wing on the plane, so we decided we needed to keep it more on farm and get something just to cut that cost every year. So then we used a grain drill that we had, and we blocked off every other row and whatnot, but we weren't covering enough ground, so we decided this would get us back on our tram lines and would be out to 30 feet wide. And we could save half of our cover crop seed if by chance we were putting the cover down and then still wanting to make our fall strips, that we wouldn't be ripping 2 rows right back out. And also we've used this machine to paddle out different things like Epsom salt on problem areas. We just carry it like an air boom, and so we find a few more uses for it. Next slide. So this is what we originally built it for, was to make our covers into strips, skip zones or skip row cover crops. It furthered our cover crop budget to be able to cover all of our acres, because we knew it had its place on our farm. We just had to find it where it fit with our system. This opened up a wider window as far as spring germination went for us. It opened that window without sacrificing, I guess, the seed bed, because we didn't have to worry about going in and making tracks with the sprayer or something, just with a fear of it getting away from us. And it let us get a little bit more growth on some of it, so we could play around with using that to help suppress and control some weeds between the rows. Next slide. So since we had it, we decided that we would try a few more things with it. And we did some interseeding in some corn for 3 years. We didn't get real crazy. It was like a 10.5 pound mix, but we could make it work. We ended up after that 3 years. This year we actually did a 9 pound mix. So we're just kind of playing with it. It helps get corn comes off last year, so we at least that way it has something down if the fall doesn't give us a chance to get it in. And we've done it in the beets for 2 years, just trying to play around with it a little bit, but it did prove to hold up last fall in the wet harvest. That the topper was a 2-wheel drive topper, and we didn't want to be out there in the rain, but we were, and she was still able to get around. So it helped with the footing. And next slide. And I guess the takeaway is just we're always thinking outside the box, always to have a plan and a B plan, and turn failures into test plots. Don't be afraid to fail or be the talk of the neighborhood. Just tell them it was a test. And thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Quick question. When you try something, do you always do a small test plot first?
What was that? It was just breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm in terrible internet. I just said, when you do something different, do you do it on a test plot or a small scale first?
Yeah, we usually, any sort of test that we're going to do, usually it's going to be, we'll take a good chunk, 10, 15, 20 acres, usually all the way across the field if it's a half a mile, a quarter mile, and at least 3 replications, so that we get a good look at the whole profile of the field and what it looks like, and get a taste for it, set ourselves up to be able to know that if it did work, that we could do it on a larger scale, but not have the huge investment into making it all perfect the first go around.
Excellent. Woody, did you have another?
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks to all our speakers. No, am I cutting out, Mel?
Yeah, a bit here and there. I don't know if it's just me, but could we have all this the speakers or the panelists turn your video back on? And these were my 5 takeaways, and just in talking with the speakers. One is start somewhere, like honestly anywhere. Like I loved how the Rayburns just didn't make excuses and they started with 6 rows. Tyler really knows his soil, especially clay. You got to know it really well. And number 3, Mark Richards really investing in the right equipment. And number 4, Harry Bierman's, we heard like it's really important to get that fertilizer on and then to cover it up. And I call Ryan Shaw, stick to the plan, Stan. It sounds like it needs like so much planning, but it really pays. So you got to make a plan A and a plan B and plan C, probably, right, Ryan? So if you could all like unmute yourselves. Oh, Woody, are you back?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
I was gonna steal a phrase from Lee Breeze, and that is, have an escape plan.
Have an escape plan, yes. So here's all our speakers' contact information. I'm just going to hold this slide up for a little bit, but it's also Q&A time. So anyone feel free to just ask a question. Open up for anyone to unmute themselves, and you can also use the chat function at the bottom there too. And if you are a CEU here for the credits too, this is your QR code. I don't know if it'll work, or just email Anne for Holland. I bet Lee has a question. Where is he?
He fell asleep.
What?
A lot of you guys are talking about spring strips. How does that work with your timing and your moisture?
We switched to stale seed bed in the spring.
So,
And that's why we leave our strip bare.
And nobody's doing any freshening of the strips?
We are, yeah, we need to just open it up, just to do more leveling, and it just is a lot more uniform seed bed to plant into.
We'll freshen our strips up in the spring if it was corn stubble, because we're going right back over the same root balls, and there's just so much root mass sometimes with 38,000 population of corn is what we do. And a lot of the soybean stubble we just no-till into, or we will make fall berms and then plant into that stale seed bed style. And our sugar beet ground, we'll either leave it in the fall and just surface ditch it out and leave it till spring, and then we'll run spring strips to fill in that lifter wheel rut, because we're going right where those beets were lifted.
Can I ask you a question, Ryan?
Yep.
So you have a widening kit for your strip tiller. So you're planting your twin rows. Like, there's how far apart are the twin rows?
They're 8 inches apart, centered on 30-inch centers.
And so how wide is your strip then?
We do for easy figuring, we just say we're 30 inches. We're making a strip on half of it on 15 when we're doing our figuring, but we're making about a 12-inch strip, and we're tightening it up with our confinement coulters to get to that 10-inch. But we found that if we put a set of baskets on the back, and if we can get 12 inches, that gives us enough room with our twin row to have our depth bands of our planter still be on solid footing, so that it's not hopping or anything.
Okay. And you're the soil warrior, you're just using the coulter, not the cog.
Correct. We used the cog the first 2 years while we established our first zones, and we noticed quite a difference in the second year. It pulled a lot easier. And when they came out with that third coulter that Tyler was talking about, we put that on with the shallow setup, and that solved a lot of our problems.
So that's still, like, that's 3 coulters on a 12-inch strip, eh?
Yep. We're running, it'd be a 13 wave up front with the lead, and then the widening kit widens our back 2 hubs out on the Soil Warrior to 8 inches center to center, so it matches our monocen planter. And we run 8-wave directional coulters on the back to move enough dirt.
Okay.
Tyler,
Yeah.
question. It's Brendan Zeller here.
Yes.
You said you put all your fertility down with your Soil Warrior. Are you not worried about burn at all, or what's
So
your fertility program look like?
So it's a lot of our ground we've been working on to build up to a level. So it's basically we're putting a crop removal rate down. So if we're putting it all down here, if it's all in the strip, it's give or take, it's about 300 pounds variable rated of maybe 8.2, 21.6, and 17 with some zinc, magnesium, and sulfur, and then that's put down at 300 pounds. But being with the soil where it's blended through, we don't have the widening kit, but we're about good 8 inches by, but we're running about 3.5 inches deep, so it's blended through there pretty good. And we've been watching, have seen 0 burn at this point. As far as all going down with the stripper, we only have test plots with that at this point. That's the goal. Right. Majority of it's probably half of that goes down with the stripper, and the other half goes down with the corn planter. If that answers that.
I had a couple of questions on the chat room. Has anybody had any experience with corn on corn with their strip toe system? And I'm going to say I have, but I'll let the speakers answer first.
Mark Richards, yeah, we have, but we just moved the rows over 15 inches. Apply for soil or crop removal and a little bit of extra nitrogen to help with residue tie-up.
We haven't tried any yet. Next year we'll have 30 acres on some lighter soil that we're gonna try doing some corn on corn and going right back over the same roots again.
And I'm gonna echo Mark's comments that when I did corn on corn, it was pretty much 15 inches over from the previous corn crop. Another question was chatted out or on the chat room was strip tilling for corn in an extended rotation. Do you guys try to get the corn back after 3 or 4 years on those same rows that they were before? That makes sense.
Mark Richards. Yes, we actually pull strips right after we harvest sugar beets right down the same shank, and then we grow corn right where they were, and we try to pull the sugar beet rows where the corn rows were 2 years before that. I'm done.
Over and out. Don't be shy, everyone. I'm just waiting for Brett to unmute himself.
I got one. Shank machines, and what's your horsepower requirements on those? Actually, all the machines, you pretty well all got different ones. What's your horsepower requirements?
Good question.
Really depends on how deep you're pulling a shank. A 12 row, if we're going 8 inches deep, you want to have like at least 400 horsepower.
And we pull the Orthman with an 8400 that may have a tuner on it, 6 inches deep in the clay in this summer. It's got its hands full, but it does work, and you can't do first pass. You can't use the fertilizer fan. Too much horsepower taken up by the hydraulics.
We're running 375 horse articulate Deere on the front of our 12 row, and we're running about 4 inches deep. But with the soil warrior, we find I like speed, trying to pull it at 9-10 mile an hour to do the best job in the heavy ground. And that tractor has its hands full most of the time.
That's what we're running ours with a 420 quad, and the tracks eat up a lot of the horsepower too, and the hydraulics. If we have both of our fertilizer tanks full of 3.5 ton apiece, we get into any hills or any heavy ground, like Tyler says, we lose that momentum and that speed that the soil warrior really needs to get the soil action out of it, and we'll drop her right to her knees, and we can't get that 9 mile an hour out of it.
We're using, our tractor's about 350 horse, so we're using on the 12 row Kuhn unit.
I have another question. So Janet mentioned getting right back on the strip, or the RTK requirements. We've seen the same thing here in North Dakota. If you get off that strip, there's a pretty significant penalty for planting outside of that. Is that what you were talking about, Janet, or is there something else related to it?
I was just saying that we don't have RTK, so we have just been basically using auto guidance on the WAS system to make our stripped rows, and then our planter with the height of the berm, it follows the strips pretty good. I suppose if you do get off of the row, yes, your plant isn't going to get the nutrients that it should, because it's not going to be where you've placed them. But it does follow along pretty good, and you can see pretty well most of the time, and it just seems to sit there.
Well, for us, RTK is a must. You have to stay on the strip, or else you're in clay soils. It's just a mess. It's, you know when you're off. We run a steering hitch on our planter too, so and we go the same way as we strip tilled. So we are always any drift, you know, it'll be having the same drift.
And
We
that
use
was, go ahead, Ryan.
We use RTK on our machine, both the tractor and the Soil Warrior steering it, and it's ours is really key. Also, if we can make those first strips straight, that sets up the whole season. To then the planter will follow that strip really nice, being 12 rows.
And on the tomato strip tiller, we run John Deere implement guidance. Every tractor that we use has got RTK, and the planters we've used since we started strip tilling for corn and sugar beets have pulled straight enough. We might have to tweak the offsets a little bit, but we can always get it within 4 inches of the center of the strip. And we have, as long as we're in that center zone, we haven't seen any negative impact on either beets or corn.
Don't be shy.
I've got a question. What's the one thing you wish you'd learned a lot earlier, or the mistake you learned the hard way that you would be glad to share with other people? And this is for anyone who wants to volunteer.
Mine actually, with going on that same RTK thing, is that to do your research on your whoever you're going to get your RTK from. There's a lot of different ones out there, and plus or minus an inch makes a big difference when you're trying to hit a strip.
I guess my advice, make sure that you think about the whole system you're going to use. Like we're no-till soybeans, no-till wheat, strip-till corn. What impact is 1 year going to have on the next? When can you put all your, I know some of the guys are putting all their fertility down in 1 year. Do you want to spread it out? But you got to think every step of the way. And like Ryan said in his, stick to the plan, Stan, but you better have a plan A, B, and C, because there are years we can't get that cover crop terminated in time. What do you do then? There are times we don't get all the strips pulled in the fall. What do you do then? So it's sitting down and figuring, make sure you have a plan. That's because we got caught a couple of years without a good enough plan or enough plans.
The other thing for us on our end is patience. You need to have patience.
I'd have to say the same as Tyler. On the clay soils, is you cannot, when you see everybody else out there, you don't go out there just because they are. It's painful, and you know, it's the 1 month or 2 months later that you look at, holy shit, wow, that really was worth waiting for.
The thing I wish I figured out sooner, having been strip tilling now going into year 12, is that the combination between strip till and cover crop, if you want to go green into the spring or something, that combination gives you a lot more flexibility than trying to slap seed into something green. Termination time, there's just a lot more options. Maybe it's gives you options for plan A, B, and C in the spring when you want to try and incorporate cover crops.
I would agree with you, Woody, on that. Like as the longer we go strip tilling and growing cover crops, there's they work hand in hand, and it's you know, there's resilience built, and so even though there are times we don't make the perfect strip, we through soil health, you know, it kind of pulls us through.
Well, I would echo that not perfect strip. The longer I've been doing this, the more forgiving the strips are in the spring when I pull the planter through than they would have been, even though they look terribly ugly in the fall. You think, how am I going to plant into this? But a little bit of freeze thaw and some better soil conditions, the strips seem to get more forgiving the longer I do this in the spring.
I would concur with that sentiment.
Thanks everyone for the discussion. And this part is we're going to actually divide you into smaller groups where it's easier for you to be more candid and ask your questions of the panelists. So I've kind of evenly distributed the panelists into 3 breakout rooms and just randomly put you in places. So it'll feel like you're going through a time-space continuum and you're going to end up in a random group with other people. And so all we'd like you to do is just introduce yourself, go around, where are you from, what kind of farming are you into, what's your experience with strip till or strip covers, and just, we've got about 15 minutes just to, you know, get to know each other, got some more questions, and then we'll all, if you can stay, that's great, and we'll all pull you back into the big room together and then probably do a little bit more Q&A and grab a beer and kind of end off the evening. So I'm going to let you, you'll just have the option to join your room, and if at any time you're like uncomfortable, you can just come back to the main room where I'll be waiting for you. So here we go. You'll have to make the first initiation to go to your room.